In this video, I want to discuss some of the major blood vessels of the body. We have two arterial plaques. They're similar but not identical. So on this green plaque, I want to talk about some of the major vessels of the body. I'm going to start in the area of the heart, and I'm going to do the arterial supply first, blood leaving the heart. So from the heart, we should already know from our cardio videos, the aortic arch, and then off of the aortic arch, the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and the left subclavian artery. The brachiocephalic trunk is going to ascend off toward the right, where it becomes the right common carotid artery and the right subclavian artery. So right common carotid and right subclavian. The left common carotid ascends into the head and neck as well. Since we've turned this model so we're looking at the left side of the head and neck, we can follow this, and it will divide the left common carotid into an internal and external carotid artery. We can't see the internal carotid artery on this model, and we only see a few branches of the external carotid. And the main branch I'd like to point out here is one that runs across the mandible and up into the face, known as the facial artery. So not a whole lot to be seen in the blood vessels of the head and neck on this model. Now I want to go back over to the right upper extremity. From that brachiocephalic trunk, we had the right subclavian artery. The right subclavian artery is not very long, and it does have branches coming from it. None on this plaque that you would be held responsible for. But as soon as we cross the lateral border of the first rib, right here, we become the axillary artery. So we're subclavian artery from here to here. Then we come axillary artery. Axillary artery is the artery of the axilla, or the armpit. And it is the axillary artery until it passes the lower border of the teres major muscle. Unfortunately, on this plaque, we don't have a teres major muscle, so we don't have that landmark. But I can tell that it stops being axillary artery right about here and becomes brachial artery, because the last branch of the axillary artery is called the posterior circumflex humeral artery. That is an artery that goes around the backside of the surgical neck of the humerus. Here's our surgical neck of our humerus, and we see this vessel here going behind the surgical neck of the humerus. The posterior circumflex humeral artery, that was the last branch of the axillary artery. So we know at this point we were still axillary. Then we become brachial artery. The brachial artery travels down in the anterior arm, crosses anterior to the elbow in the cubital fossa, and then divides into a radial artery and an ulnar artery. And there are other associated branches which you will not be held responsible for: radial recurrent and ulnar recurrent arteries, and radial collaterals and ulnar collateral arteries. And technically the ulnar artery also sends off an interosseous artery which further divides. On this plaque, what I'm concerned about is we come down as the brachial artery, divide into the radial artery, heading along the radius, and the ulnar artery heading along the ulna. They send branches that will anastomose in the hand and form palmar arterial arches. Here we depict a palmar arterial arch. There are two, a superficial and a deep. And then branches go out to the digits from there. If we look at the other upper extremity now, I'm going to follow the left subclavian to about here. As it passes the lateral border of the first rib, it becomes axillary artery. Now the left axillary artery. I know that right about here it's going to become brachial artery, because this, again, going posterior to the surgical neck of the humerus, is the posterior circumflex humeral artery. So at this point we are now brachial artery, passing anterior to the elbow and the cubital fossa, branching into the radial and ulnar arteries. But on this side of the model, we have pronated the forearm, so we lose our relationship between radial and ulnar arteries at this point. So I would only take it down to about this level for this left upper extremity. So those are the vessels that we should find on the plaque for upper extremities. Now I want to go back and look at the veins on this model. Veins generally mimic arteries, but not in all circumstances. So I want to start back at the heart, where we know that we had the superior vena cava coming into the right atrium, the inferior vena cava coming into the right atrium, and the pulmonary trunk coming out. Now it's not a vein, but remember it's blue here because it's carrying deoxygenated blood. Now I want to focus on head and neck and upper extremities. Here we have the jugular veins coming down to the brachiocephalic veins. We have an internal and external jugulars. But mostly I want to focus on this upper extremity. This shows the superficial veins of the upper extremity, and they're fairly important because of phlebotomists drawing blood, giving blood transfusions, blood donations. I'm going to start near the wrist, and notice here this is an anterior view of this right upper extremity. We have a vein that starts in the hand and runs along the ulna, and it's going to pass all the way up along the medial side of the forearm and arm to enter into the brachial vein. Now the brachial vein mimics the brachial artery, but on this model it's been cut off right here. This vein running up along the medial side of the forearm and arm is known as the basilic vein. So here's the basilic vein, and this is a subcutaneous vein, and it's going to drain into the brachial vein. On the more anterior and somewhat lateral aspect of the forearm, we see what is called the anterior median vein of the forearm, and it travels upward near the cubital fossa. Now, more posteriorly and lateral on the forearm, we can see another vein, which was actually down here lower, but the artist version, we just start to see it here, travels up and along the lateral anterior aspect of the arm and joins into the junction very near either the axillary vein or the subclavian vein. That is known as the cephalic vein. So here's our basilic vein, here is our cephalic vein, and there's a lot of different patterns going on right here at the elbow. So it's very important for phlebotomists to know the different patterns so they know which vein they can enter to draw blood. But on this particular model, what we see is that this median or anterior median vein of the forearm comes up, and it can branch. The branch that heads over toward the cephalic vein is, to the basilic vein, is called the median basilic vein. The branch that heads over to the cephalic vein is called the median cephalic vein. So again, here is our basilic vein, our cephalic vein, median basilic vein, median cephalic vein. The basilic vein will enter into the brachial vein. The cephalic vein goes higher and enters either into the axillary vein or into the subclavian vein. Then we pick up the jugular veins, and we have the brachiocephalic vein from the right, brachiocephalic vein from the left, forming superior vena cava going into the right atrium.